Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going to talk about this wonderful time of year, which is winter time, and what we can do to help our backyard bird friends through a variety of methods that are things that anyone or almost anyone can do at their homes or place of residences. So let's jump right in to creating a winter wonderland. Real quick, who am I? As Emily mentioned, I'm the partner naturalist for WBFI. Um, I'm an ornithologist, but birds are also my hobby and my passion. And I am the owner of Flocking Around, which has a lot of information on questions, around the bird feeding world and just around the birding world in general. One of the questions I always like to answer when we do these webinars for folks who are watching live right now, or for those who are watching the recorded version who might have the question, why do we feed birds? There's different motivations for different people, but some of the big motivations that we see when people answer this question are: we feed birds for the welfare of the birds themselves, improving their body condition, helping to make up for lost food resources or, destroyed habitat. We do it because it has a positive role on our mental health. Um, we do it to bring that nature connection, that natural connection, a lot closer to us. So there's a lot of reasons as to why we feed birds, but those are just a few. So your motivation might be different, but these are just some of the other benefits that some folks especially point to. So today we're going to talk about how to help winter birds, and some of the species that we're really focusing on how we can play a positive role are species that are experiencing some of the greatest decline in North America. So one of the species that I'm going to highlight today is the evening grosbeak. And since the 1970s, we have lost over 90% of our evening grosbeak population, um, which that's a lot, right? That is an extreme amount that we are losing. And it's not just evening grosbeaks, but a lot of other species that live in the same types of habitats as the evening grosbeak. And then these are all the birds that oftentimes come down and show up at our bird feeders in wintertime. So, by providing additional food sources, food resources, we can, really help to provide a way for these birds to hang on as we work for larger solutions to help their populations. So, while this is a very kind of gloomy picture, to understand that one of our favorite feeder birds has declined massively, there is some positive in knowing that conservation efforts do bring hope. So while evening grosbeaks have been on the decline, think about the success story of species like the bald eagle or the peregrine falcon, where they were on the brink of extinction, and conservation efforts helped to bring them back. So there is hope. So take this with, yes, we have work to do, but that work can be done and it can prove successful. Okay, so why is winter feeding so important, and why do we often see a boost in birds in wintertime? It really just it comes down to a couple of big things, and that is temperature, food shortage, and then there's an increased predation risk for some birds in some areas, or just an increased chance of death from conditions, which ties back into temperature. So why is that important? Well, when external temperatures drop, birds have to compensate for that by maintaining body heat. Well, maintaining body heat requires food. So birds then have to make sure that they're receiving enough calories, right? We always talk about calories and use, I got to cut the calories. Well, birds try to up the calories because they're burning so many calories just maintaining body temperature. And we often talk, well, birds migrate away from cold temperatures. Well, not all birds. Some birds stay in the area that they're around year round in, regardless of the conditions. And so they need that food, that high calorie food, to help them maintain body temperature and survive through bad low temperatures, major weather events. If you're anywhere right now in North America, you probably felt some effect from this large system that just swept across. I know here at my home, over a foot of snow and counting. And so, we can help these birds during these harsh conditions with these supplemental food sources. And then there's a food shortage. Some birds, they eat seeds all year. They mostly eat vegetative matter, but some birds switch to a mostly insect diet in the summer. And then in winter, when there are far fewer arthropods to eat, whether it's an insect or a spider or what have you, then they'll switch to adding a lot more seeds and other vegetative matter into their diet to help supplement and survive through harsh winters. So in wintertime, we experience some things that create conditions for birds where they can utilize that supplementary food that we offer as part of our bird feeding hobby. So this winter, how can you create your wonderland, your winter wonderland? How can you help? A couple of quick steps here, 6 quick steps. You can plant it, you can place it, you can clean it, you can fill it, you can treat it, you can heat it. Keeping it simple here, and we're going to dive into these in a lot more detail. So first, plant it. What does it mean? Well, native plants. You can plant native plants that help birds all year. And we're talking everything from providing a food source. So you can see these 2 American goldfinches. This photo was taken just a few weeks prior. So these are dead native sunflowers, and these goldfinches are utilizing them as an additional food source, in addition to things like bird feeders. So planting native plants as a food source is a great thing to do because they help birds all year, and you can consider what plants you're planting to help birds all year. Plants that host insects in the summertime, berries in the fall, and seeds in winter. Having a variety of plants is a great way to help birds all year. But additionally, think of what birds need. They need shelter. They need a place where they can get out of weather conditions, where they can warm up, where they can hide from predators. So plant things that also give birds shelter. Whether it's a windbreak or a snow break or something like that. But again, focus on native plants, because native plants are the plants that birds have adapted to. If you plant something that birds aren't used to using, whether it's eating the fruit of or the berries of, or their bills, they can't open the seeds because it's too hard of a shell, it can be a problem. So plant things that birds can use, plant native plants. So that's our first one, plant it. Number 1, plant it. Number 2, place it. So now that you've planted all those amazing plants, which maybe you haven't yet, but now you're thinking about it next year, then you can roll this into that. Place your feeders in just a great location. It's all about location, right? And that's real estate. But it's also real estate for your bird feeders. Think about what your birds need. Well, if they're going to come down and get food, they want a place to take that food back to feed on it where they feel safe and warm. So location, location, location. Put your feeders in areas where birds then can quickly access shelter to get away from predators, or if it starts snowing or raining or it's windy, they can get to an area where they can keep warm, they can stay out of the conditions, and they can feel safe. So if your feeders are near safety, the birds feel safer, and you might see a lot more activity than if you place it, out in the wide open. Now, some birds will prefer it out in the wide open. It also depends on what species you want to attract. But for the most part, most of the birds that we see in wintertime, especially these birds that come down in big flocks, they like that security of having some nice shelter nearby. So that's number 2, place it. Number 3, then you got to fill it. After you place it, you got to fill that feeder up and keep it full. Just one day of empty feeders, you might notice then a slight dip in the birds coming around because they might go somewhere else to find that food. So keep up on keeping your feeders full. And if your birds are draining them a little too quickly, then maybe you need to back down on the number of feeders you have, or you have to start, rationing it. But just make sure you get into a pattern of you fill every so often so that the birds learn that pattern as well, because they will. They'll hear you come out. They'll hear you open your trash can, full of seed. They'll hear that metal lid pop off, and the birds will just come and sit and wait for it. They get used to the same patterns, and so it's they're Pavlovian birds almost, except for without the salivating. Also, if you know of a major weather event coming, like this big storm that just swept across much of North America, fill your feeders before then, maybe even add an extra feeder or two just for a few days to give birds more space and more opportunities to grab some seed or suet or what have you, so that they can be well fueled. Because again, major weather events like this can really put a toll on a bird's body condition. And the one thing, or one of the many things that it's great about bird feeding, is bird feeding helps birds' body condition, meaning they have more muscle, they have more fat, they're healthier overall, they can battle against disease better. So improve birds' body condition by, giving them that extra kick right before major weather events. And then within the food, and we're going to break this down a little bit more even, it's all about the calories. Provide the high calorie snacks for the birds. So one of those is suet. Suet is a great wintertime bird food. In summertime, you might see use go down on it, or it might melt, if you have one that isn't a no melt. But in wintertime, birds love suet because it is just high caloric fats. And usually it's packed with peanuts and corn and sometimes mealworms and berries to attract different types of birds. But it's the fat. That fat really helps birds. Remember, we talked about at the beginning, temperature means low temperatures mean that body temperature has to maintain, and it's working harder and it's burning more calories. So providing high calorie snacks like fat, just fat thrown out there in a cube, well, the birds are going to love it, and it's going to attract some different birds, which we're going to touch on more. Get a bit nutty with it. Tree nuts often go underutilized. So, this is peanuts obviously on the screen, but think of the big tree nuts, things like pecans and other things like that. Consider them as another alternative food source. Just if it's going to be one with a thick shell, most of our birds have not adapted to cracking those shells open. So you might have to buy them shelled, but consider the big hefty nuts because they're full of oils and fats and other great macronutrients that birds desperately need. And especially in wintertime, these types of foods can really provide a boost to our wonderful backyard birds. So get a bit nutty, okay? And this is still all part of step 3. We're still in step 3, the fillet phase, all right? So these are some things you can fill it with. Sunflower seed is a great one. High calorie, lots of oil fat. It's a great selection for birds. It is one of the most diverse audience seeds, meaning that it attracts the greatest diversity of birds. So it's a great one to consider for your backyard bird feeders, and then supplement maybe with some of those first two that I mentioned, the suet or the tree nuts. Other choices. Okay, so there's a lot of other seeds you can pick, and we're going to go into those when we go into some of the birds that we see more in wintertime. That's going to be towards the end. So, the old cliche, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Well, with birds, feed for the birds you want, not necessarily the birds you have, okay? So if you want a more diverse audience of birds, you need to provide a more diverse palette of foods. And we'll touch on this on a few distinct birds that, especially in wintertime, we see a few more of, and we'll get to that. All right, our next step, clean it. So you've planted it, you've placed it, you've filled it, and after you've filled it, hopefully after a week, and try to at least do it monthly, you need to clean it. And the old saying, cleanliness is next to birdiness. I don't think that's right, but it's close enough. And clean feeders mean more birds. So have some clean feeders. Clean your bird feeders. Give them the bow. Give them the elbow. What I mean by that is elbow grease. Scrub off the organic matter that's covering them, whether it's bird poop or seed hulls, husks, other just random stuff that came out of the trees or what have you. Give them a good scrub. Get the organic matter off first, and then bleach them. You want to get the organic matter off so that then the bleach can get to all the nooks and crannies, especially the areas where that buildup is. So then you want to soak them in a diluted bleach solution. And if you want more information on the best ways to clean your bird feeders, WBFI has a great resource page all about keeping your bird feeders clean, because it is the best way to help our birds by keeping clean bird feeders. All right, our next step, treat it. And what I mean by treat it is if you want to place your bird feeders in an area where you're going to look out your window. So this is me looking out my window right here. In fact, this is a photo from last winter, I believe, maybe even 2 winters ago. If I actually peek up over my computer, that's the window I'm looking out right now as I do this webinar. I can see I got a red squirrel on one of my feeders right now. There's a mountain chickadee grabbing a peanut off my windowsill. My windows, though, have this film, and you can see it here, this film that kind of covers certain parts of this photo. It's kind of a clear looking film, and there's some gaps in it where you can see there's no film. Well, windows are a pretty big problem for birds. Birds don't understand what windows are and how they function. And so what birds see oftentimes can be a reflection, and it looks like more green space, a place to fly and escape, especially if a predator comes through. So if you have your feeders too close to the window, and generally that's between 3 feet and 30 feet, that is that danger zone where they can build up enough speed to hit the window hard enough that it can hurt or kill them. So if you're in that zone there, well, then you want to do something so that you can still enjoy the birds and the birds can be safe around your windows. So this is our next step, treat it. Find a window treatment for your windows. They make all kinds of things. You can use, the window paint, the pretty window paint, do pretty designs on your windows. I'm not the most artistic, so that's not the route I went. They also make these wonderful retrofit stickers, or just, like this particular thing here. This is it's a long decal type thing where you measure it out, and then you want to place it no more than 4 inches, each one no more than 4 inches apart, ideally 2 inches apart, because then the birds don't think they can squeeze between those areas, okay? So use a window treatment to help reduce bird collisions. It's a great thing you can do just to add another layer of protection for birds at your home, because if birds are hitting your windows and they're dying, well, then they're not enjoying your feeders anymore, and you can no longer enjoy them at your feeders anymore. So it's a simple way to do something extra to help the birds in your backyard. Very simple step you can do, and you can find these all over the place online. Particularly these ones here are called Kaleidoscape tape. They receive high marks from the American Bird Conservancy's window treatment tests. So they're a good option, but they make UV markers, the window chalk paint. Again, just focus on the pattern. You want to make sure that you try to minimize the large gaps. So 2 inches to 4 inches, but definitely not more than 4 inches. And the closer you get to 2-inch gaps, the better. And it doesn't have to be long strips. They can even just be little polka dots all over, which work great too. Okay, then a necessity we often forget. All right, one of our last steps here, might be our last step, heat it. Water. Now, if you live in the southern US, this is not a problem for you. You're not experiencing single-digit temperatures like I am right now. So you have accessible water all year. But for those of us who live in areas where it's cold, water accessibility for birds becomes difficult. Sometimes you'll see them eating snow, or they'll eat out of a gross puddle somewhere in a driveway or something like that. So if you can provide a clean place with a little bird bath heater to keep the water open, it is great. Birds will thank you and they will love it. It is the finishing touch on your oasis for birds. And it seems wild that, well, but I mean, there's snow everywhere. Yes, but if you think about it, eating that cold snow, that's going to then require, right, more caloric use than to help maintain body temperature, right? So providing a water source that is, maybe not hot, because the bird baths are going to be countered by the external temperatures, but at least, closer to above, frozen water levels, well, that's going to be, less difficult for the bird than to counteract with using calories to keep their bodies warm. So provide water and then make sure it doesn't get frozen. All right. If you're going to put a bird bath out in wintertime, you got to find a way to keep it open. Otherwise, then, the birds that have grown dependent on it or know where they have a clean and accessible source of water, they lose it. It can provide a new stress for them. So if you're going to put it out, keep it open. And if you can't, take it back down and put it out when conditions have improved. Okay, in wintertime, you're going to see other wildlife. Now, some wildlife take a break in wintertime. right? Whether it's hibernating or they migrate away or, whatever it is, some wildlife are still active and they still need food also. So if you experience things like wonderful little squirrels like this that come into your feeders, have a plan for what you're going to do. If that means your plan is just, I don't mind the squirrels and I want them here and I'm going to let them come in and eat the seed, all right, great plan. And if you want to do something to deter them or mitigate against them or provide them a feeding station separate from the birds, so hey, squirrels stay over here and eat, birds stay over here and eat, that's great. Do that too. Just have a plan for it. Not all rodents go dormant. And when I say rodents, I'm talking the smaller ones, not just the squirrels, but the little smaller ones too, mice, voles, things like that. They're still going to be active even during cooler temperatures if you live in an area with cooler temperatures. So have a plan as to what you're going to do for seed that falls to the ground and attracts those. Consider cleaning up the seed on the ground if you can, or consider, using something like a live trap. I get deer mice. I live out in the country a little bit, so get deer mice here. I put out a live trap with peanut butter and peanuts in it, and I catch, several deer mice at once, and then I take them somewhere else and turn them loose away from my home. So have a plan for what you're going to do to deal with, some of the other organisms that might be attracted to your feeders. You might get things like deer in wintertime. And while that sounds exciting at first, until you see the deer ripping the feeders down from whatever they're being held up by, well, then that creates a slight problem. So have a plan for what you're going to do in the event, of a new wildlife interaction at your bird feeders. And again, if your plan is just to let them do their thing, hey, that's great. Make sure to check with your local laws. In some places, if deer coming into feeders, that can be something you can get, a finger wag at. So just make sure to check your laws about that, about other mammals specifically coming into feeders. Most of the time, birds are a-okay. Okay, so as I mentioned back when we were talking seed, what we fill it with, right? So we plant it, we place it, we fill it, we clean it, we treat it, we heat it. So if we go back to the fillet, let's talk about some of the birds that we see in wintertime that some places don't see for much of the year. And then in wintertime, all of a sudden, we see a small explosion of them maybe in our area. So we're going to look at some wintertime specialties that move down into North America, and I'm going to highlight some of the things you can do to attract them. All right, so let's start with the bird we just saw, which is a dark-eyed junco. Now, for me here, I see them year-round, different subspecies, so they look very, very different. The ones I see in summertime are this beautiful light gray with a pink bill and a red triangle on their back. And then the ones I see in wintertime are really dark slatey gray. And those are different subspecies of junco. They're the same species, but they look different. They're different breeding populations. They're different subspecies. So what this is a map provided by eBird, which is a great resource if you want to learn more about birds or find out what birds are being seen in your area. This map is going to show us what dark-eyed juncos do throughout the year. Now, it starts at the beginning of January. So we're going to see January, but what we're going to do is we're going to focus on when it gets to, whoops, hold on. There we go. When it gets to the end of the year, we're going to really look at what's happening. So as you see us get to the A, S, and O, that's August, September, October, watch what happens to the junco population. All right, so this January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So this is summertime. This is where juncos are in the summer. Now fall's coming up. Here's fall, October, November, December. Okay, so those birds, they spend, you saw most of them, they were either in the mountains or up high in Canada, and then they're going to start to return in wintertime. So dark-eyed juncos are one that for much of the year, you might not see them in your backyard, but this time of year, look at how dark that purple is across that band, across the middle of North America there a little bit. We see a lot of dark-eyed juncos this time of year. Well, if you want dark-eyed juncos in your backyard, remember, feed for the birds you want, not the birds you have. Dark-eyed juncos love millet. Now, they'll eat other things. If you put out Niger feeders and that Niger spills onto the ground a little bit, dark-eyed juncos eat Niger. They'll eat milo. They'll eat bits of black oil sunflower seed. You won't see them too often sit on a feeder to get them unless it's a big enough feeder. Here at my home, when there's snow on the ground, they'll sit in platform feeders. I've seen them sit on suet feeders. I have photos of them on suet feeders during big winter storms. They'll even, like, sometimes they'll latch onto the sides of the mesh tube finch feeders, which have the little Niger seeds, or sometimes if you get a certain finch feed, it'll have millet in it, real small seed millet. But if you just, you just go buy a big hefty sack of white millet and just put it out, sprinkle it, in little areas on the ground for the juncos, that will do a lot to attract them and keep them in your area. But juncos love protection on the ground. So if you don't have a big heavy tree line of, junipers or cedars or pines or anything like that, or big, hefty bushes that stay, pretty dense even during wintertime, you need to find something else. So, for instance, what I do is I create what I call the Junco Gym, kind of a play on jungle gym, if you will, where I take a bunch of dead sticks and things that fall from my trees throughout the year, and I make a brush pile, essentially, with sticks and leaves. And if my old Christmas tree, which I don't go buy a Christmas tree and then cover it in tinsel, I go harvest one myself, and then I take it and I'll throw it out in the Junco Gym. Just give them shelter, and then you can drop some of that seed in that shelter, or you can provide a feeder that specifically is just for white millet. If you saw in that previous photo, that was a Junco sitting on a feeder. It had a wide base for something like a Junco that likes to sit on a big platform, and then it filled millet out into that base through some ports at the bottom. So it just spills out onto that platform where the Juncos like to be. So if you want dark-eyed Juncos, which this time of year you can see almost anywhere, across North America, you've got a pretty good chance to see them. Central Canada, a little bit tougher this time of year, but for other folks, a little bit easier. That's one way to get them and keep them around. Evening grosbeak, we highlighted this one at the beginning. They have experienced major population loss. There's a group of people working to figure out, some of the causes behind it and what we can do to try to help them. And they're out there doing on the ground work to really learn about the evening grosbeak and its population loss. So you can see January, a few places you can find them. Now this is maybe a little bit more typical of what we'd see in an evening grosbeak movement, but there are things called eruptions. And when an eruption happens, evening grosbeaks will come down as far as Texas, and I don't know if there are records for Florida, but you will see them all over the southern United States oftentimes during big eruption years. Now, this is a small eruption year for evening grosbeaks, especially if you live in the eastern part of North America. You are likely to be seeing a few more evening grosbeaks than other years. There's not a huge eruption year for any major species that we really enjoy at our feeders, but locally there might be some pretty good size eruptions to watch for. So this is what the evening grosbeak does. It's January, February. This is March, April, May. We're getting into the breeding season, so you can see they start moving back north, and then coming into fall, October, November, December, and then look, they're getting down into southern Appalachian Mountains, and then they're moving down into the northern Great Plains. So we see a big shift in evening grosbeaks, during the winter time, because their food sources maybe are changing, or if there are shortages of food in certain areas, that's what causes an eruption, where then they move to an area to get more food. Pine siskins are one that everyone loves. Everyone loves to get pine siskins. For evening grosbeaks, let me mention, if you want evening grosbeaks, they generally prefer big, sturdy, stable platform feeders with black oil sunflower seed. It's one of their favorites. They will eat out of tube feeders, but they have to have a big enough platform for them to feel comfortable sitting on. They just generally prefer to have the space, and especially if it's a big flock of them, they want an area where they can all sit together and feed together as a flock. So big, sturdy platform feeder set somewhere secure that the evening grosbeaks can enjoy. All right, pine siskins. Pine siskins, also an eruptive finch that we see a lot of in wintertime. Now, in some parts of the country, you might have them, or parts of North America, you might have them all year. If you do, lucky you. I'm one of the lucky ones. I get them all year. But In wintertime, we can see huge flocks of them, whereas, in summertime, you might only see 2 to 4 at a time. But in wintertime, big flocks of pine siskins will show up. So this is what that looks like. January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So here's breeding season. This is where they spend their summer. This is where they're all nesting. You see the Rocky Mountains up the Pacific coast, and then fall into winter. And so you can see big movements of them down throughout the southern U.S., some of those pine belts across the southern U.S., and then out in eastern North America, big numbers of them out there, and then big local groups of them out on the Pacific coast as well. All the way up, you can see some of them stay even in Alaska throughout the wintertime. So it's all about food. They're eruptive, so if they have a food source, they'll stay, and if they don't, they'll move. And one of the great things that we do as backyard bird feeding people, we put out food then that, as long as you stay consistent, keep it full, they can depend on, and they'll stick around your area throughout the wintertime until it's time to head back and breed. For pine siskins, finch feeds, Niger is a great one. Niger is a seed that pine siskins really love. Put it in a little mesh tube-like feeder that it's got wire mesh, and it's got little holes where they can cling to the side of it, and then they can pull the seeds out. They really, really love that. It's a great way to attract pine siskins and keep them around during the wintertime. Now, the red-breasted nuthatch is a species that in some areas you find it year-round, and a lot of areas you find it year-round. But even though it's a resident for much of the region, for much of the continent, it still has seasonal movements. And so red-breasted nuthatches, what they'll do is they'll move based on food. So this is January, February, March, April, May. So now we're into the breeding season. So this is where they spend their breeding season. You can kind of see that belt of where they're at. But then in wintertime, see those movements down into the southern United States, especially the southeastern part of the United States. And then you'll see maybe more densities of them across eastern North America. And again, that Pacific area. And of course, through the Rockies as well. You'll have very localized movements of them depending upon food sources. Red-breasted nuthatches love suet. Remember, back to the suet, get the fat out. Almost all nuthatches really like suet. So if you put suet out, it's a great thing for nuthatches and woodpeckers. But red-breasted nuthatches also will just eat out of general black oil sunflower feeders. Remember, I said black oil sunflower attracts a large diversity of birds. It's a shell that they can easily crack through. The seed has a lot of great nutritional value, and again, high calorie, which is what they need during the wintertime. So great resource for them. Black oil sunflower seed, can't go wrong, but also suet. And some other birds will struggle to feed on the suet feeder, usually because of the way it's positioned. If it's upside down, nuthatches, they live their lives upside down. But other birds, not so much. So suet can be a way to attract nuthatches without attracting some other birds. The purple finch, there's an amazing group called the Finch Research Network, and they actually provide updates as to which species we can expect to see eruptions of. And they use the purple finch to kind of help understand which years we might have big flights. They call them flights or eruptions of other species. Because if purple finches are moving in large numbers, oftentimes that might mean we might see other finches moving in large numbers. Now, what you're going to see in this one is the West Coast purple finches, which are the same species. They're sedentary. They're not going to move too much. Localized movements maybe. But purple finches during the summertime are not found in a lot of the southern areas of North America. But in wintertime, put out the right food and you could get them in your backyard. So this January, February, March, April, May. So here's the breeding season. This is where they breed. So you might not see them all summer. Here comes fall, and look what happens. They come storming through that funnel in eastern North America and end up across those pine belts and deciduous belts of forest all across the southeastern U.S. So having seed for them, they're a big black oil sunflower feeder, mesh tubes, just any kind of way you can provide black oil sunflower seed. Purple finches will try to find a way to utilize. They really, really love black oil sunflower seed. They're a medium-sized finch. You can compare them to like something like a goldfinch. They're larger than a goldfinch, and they will utilize things like Niger seed feeders, which is that smaller seed. But if you have black hole sunflower seed, they will definitely pick it. Here's a pretty eruptive one. I wanted to show this one just because it's cool. It's not just a North American species. It occurs in Europe and Asia as well. So this is what it looks like throughout the year. This is the common redpoll, small finch, prefers Niger feeders, little seed. It has a tiny bill, so it prefers tiny seed. This is what it does. January, February. Now we're going to come into the breeding season. So watch what happens. Breeding season. Up into the northern latitudes, Arctic Circle especially, you see that. And then as wintertime comes, look what happens. They storm down. Now, the left side, it's the left side for me, the North American continent over there, you can see they kind of push down into the northern Great Plains and even out in the east and into the Pacific Northwest as well. They're very eruptive. So if they have a shortage of food, they will pour into a given area in huge numbers. So, something you can provide for, but if you don't see them one year, that doesn't mean you won't ever get them. I had my first 2 last year, and I haven't seen any other winters. So, it's going to be dependent upon what their natural food sources are in the areas where they might normally winter. And if they have a shortage, you might see 300 at your feeders. And if there isn't, you might not see any for years. Here's a less common feeder bird, but still one that will come into feeders if the right foods are offered. For the American robin, mealworms, they will come in and eat suet. But also remember, one of our steps was heat it. Well, robins need water in wintertime. And guess what? As much as many of us think of the robin as the bird of spring, it actually winters across much of the central to even northern-ish parts of North America. Not the most northern, but still a lot higher latitudes than most folks think of. Growing up, I was always told, well, the robin's the sign of spring. Well, except for the robin doesn't leave in wintertime, at least not the places I lived. So, it's a bird that even in wintertime, you can provide resources to that might get it to, come to your yard and take advantage of. Berries, if you can provide dried fruits, dried berries, especially, mealworms, suet, and water. Those things are the types of things that would attract something like a robin or maybe a hermit thrush or a bluebird. Bluebirds winter across almost all of North America. You can find them, locally, very small groups of them here and there. They do have some southwardly movements, but, if you provide the right food and they're in your area, you might see them. So this is January, February, March, April, May. Now we're into the breeding season. See what happens? Big north movements. And then as fall comes around, yes, they do come south, but look at this map. They are still in very localized areas. They're pretty far north. I can see a line, and I don't know if I can draw on this one or not, but I can still see a line where there are still birds in Canada, robins, lots of American robins, even at the end of December. And we're actually seeing there are trends thanks to the Christmas bird count, which is coming up. And if you want to participate in a Christmas bird count, you can do so just by watching your bird feeders and sending that data in to whoever your local Christmas bird count compiler is. So you can participate just by feeding birds. But Christmas bird count data is showing us that these birds are wintering further and further north in greater numbers. So whereas maybe they used to spend their winters further south, now we're seeing robins that are wintering in more numbers further and further north. And that's one of the great things about participating in something like the Christmas bird count, which is a community science event, is you can contribute data then to help scientists and conservationists understand what birds are doing and how they're changing. And so robins are wintering further and further north. Okay, so we'll take some time for questions, but first, if you have more questions, if you have more questions, seek out help, whether it's through WBFI, whose contact information I'll put up in just a moment. My contact information I'll put up in a moment. But seek help if you have questions. You can find usually local organizations like Audubon or field ornithology groups or just bird watching clubs, people who have maybe done it and have some local experience and knowledge that they can provide. So seek help. Find other locals that do it, that you can lean on and ask questions and find out, where they're getting their seed maybe, if you're unsure where to go. But also there's a retail locator on WBFI's website that can help you find area, who's selling certain products in your area. So, utilize those resources. And again, local, or I'll provide contact information for WBFI and myself. And then get involved in your local bird organization, so you can learn how to dig deeper into this amazing hobby and to helping protect birds and love birds, and then most importantly, share that love of birds. If you're new to bird feeding, or if you've been doing it a long time, have you considered giving a bird feeder as a Christmas present this year? I got mine wrapped. So consider sharing this love, connecting people with nature, especially, as we seem to become more and more disconnected from nature. Bird feeding is a great way to bring that connection closer to home, especially for those maybe who don't feel as comfortable, traipsing out into the woods alone. Well, bringing a little bit of the woods to your backyard can be a great way to do it. So share that love with others, with friends, with family. Share it with a stranger. Who knows? Just hand a bird feeder out to a stranger somewhere. Do a bird feeder in a giveaway. Donate some bird feeders to local auctions, to help instigate some interest there. Just share this amazing love of these amazing creatures, and a great way to get them in a more intimate space where we can truly enjoy them. So with that, if we have questions, we can take some questions, and then contact information for WBFI right there. You can see the website, WBFI.org. There's the info at WBFI.org if you have a question you want to send through email, and then my contact information also there at the bottom, info@flockingaround.com. If you have a question you want to reach out, you don't want to ask here, or if you're watching the recorded version of this and you can't ask it live, well, reach out with a question from the presentation, or if it's not pertaining to the presentation, send it over that way.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Zach. We do have a couple questions, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. Our first question, hi, Christy, is, will sunflower hearts attract birds as much as regular shelled sunflower seeds?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, if they don't have to work for the seed, they'll take advantage of it. So yeah, if you want to provide, seed without shell, birds will love and appreciate that just as much. The shell, what it does do is it provides a little bit of protection for that seed, might help it last a little bit longer. But if you want, a little less mess, things like that, providing something without a shell is great also. So yeah, definitely something you can do that birds will still appreciate, definitely.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what she was thinking too. She said, we're just saving them a step, right?
Yeah, exactly. Saving a step. And again, the biggest thing is you might just have to keep up on changing it more frequently. The biggest benefit of that shell is, it is nature's natural food preservative almost, right? We put our food, if we want to preserve it in a sack or something like that, or and you put it in your lunch pail. Well, nature preserves its seeds in, casings that help it to maybe last a little bit longer. But also, you might be going through it so quickly that it's not a big deal at all. So just, consider your circumstances, but yeah, birds will love it, and maybe less of a mess.
Perfect. I hope that answered your question, Christy. Another question, Zach, could you talk a little bit about the holiday and Christmas decorations that are commonly put out this time of year, and how they help birds, or vice versa, harm them?
Yeah, there are some, if you put out plastic decorations with berries on them, things like that, if birds consume them, that can be dangerous. Or you put out certain plant parts that have berries that are poisonous to birds, that can also be harmful to them. Anything where birds can get caught in it or consume something that's non-edible or shouldn't be edible for them, anything like that can be dangerous to birds. We experience it like with Halloween. People put out that fake webbing, birds get tangled in it. Anything that they can get tangled in, so if you're putting out, fake snow or something like that, and it's something that the birds, if their feet get into it, and all birds have little sharp claws. Even look at this house finch. It's not a predator bird, but if you look closely at its little feetsies there, look at those claws on this non-predatory bird. Those are some hefty claws on those toes. And so if that bird accidentally grabs, some, is it called flocking or whatever it is? The only flocking that should be out at Christmas time is flocking around. That's terrible joke. But no, if they grab that fake snow stuff, or cotton balls, or whatever it is like that, it can get stuck to them or they can get stuck in it. And small birds do not require much stress for it to be a major problem. So if they get stressed out very quickly, they can go into a shock-like state and die very quickly. So anything birds can get tangled in, if you can do something to minimize that. And then also another underappreciated point is about Christmas. And I don't want to be the fun police. So I'm going to try not to be while also explaining the hazard. But nighttime illumination stresses birds out. Think about if someone were to shine a light on you while you're sleeping, that would be, detrimental to your health. Having a light on while sleeping would mean you don't go through all your stages of sleep, which is bad for your personal health. So if you're going to put up Christmas lights, put them on a timer where they shut off at a certain point so that birds are still getting then, some level of minimal light at night. We call it artificial light at night, and it's a problem that conservationists are combating all across, not just North America, but across the globe. Of artificial light at night interrupts natural rhythms of birds and other wildlife. They're sleeping outside in the tree that you just covered in string lights, and so if you can get it to have a timer where it shuts off at a certain point, that can really be better for the bird's overall health.
Awesome, great feedback. That's what I was going to ask about next, was the lights. So perfect. And let me see. Oh, those maps that you were showing, you mentioned those were on the eBird website, so anybody could have access to those?
Yep, you go to ebird.org, click on the Science tab, Status and Trends, and then type in the species that you want to see the animation of. That's called the abundance animation. They have range maps, they have abundance maps, they have trend maps to show you what the trends of certain birds are doing in what regions. So if you want to find out, well, are purple finches in my area, are their populations seeming to increase or decrease? Well, they'll have a map that can show you the trend locally as to what your birds are doing. So great resource there. And again, that's eBird. Click on Science, Status and Trends, and then type in the species name you want to see. Type out the full name because they do it for a lot of different birds. So if you only type in, part of the name, you might get a list of birds. So type in the full name of the bird, and you'll have to use the correct name. So if you use a colloquial name, it won't show up. Okay, so if you type in something like yellow finch, which is what a lot of people might call the American goldfinch, well, there's a bird actually, called that's not from North America, and it might take you to that. So if you use a name that's not, what is the accepted, accepted name by the certain checklist that eBird uses, it won't show up. So you have to use the correct name. And if you don't know what a bird's called, again, feel free to reach out to WBFI or myself, and I can give you what the accepted English or common name is for that species.
Perfect, thank you. Do you have any more information? I know we could look it up ourselves as well on the Christmas bird count, like when that starts.
Yes, so the Christmas bird count actually starts, gosh, is it today? Starts today.
Okay,
now,
perfect.
It's not an ongoing thing. There are local counts in any given areas. And here, let me pull it up and I'll share my screen again. That could be helpful for folks, especially for those who are joining the recording. Let me pull up the map. Okay, show my screen again.
Yep.
Expand this out. Okay, so it's if you just type in Audubon Christmas bird count into a search engine, it will pop up. The URL is kind of lengthy, but if you come to this page, you'll see this, and it says Audubon Christmas bird count. Scroll down to join the Christmas bird count. If you click on that, it'll bring you to this page. It's a page within a page, and then you have to make another click. Click here for a map view of the circles expected to be included in the 123rd Christmas bird count. Some circles disappear after so many years if they can't find someone to host them. New circles pop up. I just started a new circle for a count this year. So there are new circles, old circles, and they're changing, so they'll try to keep it updated. But if you click on this, it'll take you to this map, and you'll want to do this on a computer. On a phone, it does not work as well. So try to use a a laptop or a desktop. Then it'll bring up this map, and so all of these circles. Oops. It takes a while. It's a lot of data, so it can take a moment to load. But all of these little dots you're seeing with a bird symbol on it, those are Christmas bird counts. So you can see they happen everywhere from the Arctic Circle all the way down to the southern tip. It looks like in Argentina there. So counts happen all across the Western Hemisphere, so you can find out where you want to participate in one. So if you scroll in, I'm going to scroll in here. It's going to take a minute. It has to render.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. All right, we need to back out just a little bit here. There we go. So just come up here. So you find the area you live in, zoom in on that part of the map. Give it a moment to continue its work here. Okay, so then I'm going to use the circle that we just started over here. And if you click on the circle of the one you would like to participate in, it will tell you instructions. It'll tell you who to contact for that circle. It'll tell you when the count date is, and it'll give some comments about the count. So that's how then you can learn how to participate. And it's for all circles. So no matter where you are, if you have a circle near to you, you can just click on it, and it'll give you contact. Sometimes if they haven't decided on the date they're going to do the count, it might say TBD, in which case it's best just to reach out to the person running it and ask them. The colors indicate how open they are. Sometimes you can only participate if you contact ahead of time. So like in this one's red because right now they need someone to take over that circle. So the colors do indicate something, but still click on it and see what that information is on if it's still possible to participate. And you don't have to go out to join. You don't have to go hiking 10 miles in the snow or drive 30 miles that day. You can just participate oftentimes by counting birds at your feeders if your feeders are within the circle, the diameter of the circle. So it's a great way to participate in the Christmas bird count without having to commit maybe as much time to it.